What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, but it's not about me tonight. It's about men and masculinity, and we're continuing the epic conversations called M&M Explores. We have, for me, a new friend with me tonight, but there's going to be a gentleman coming on later, Lee Rosen, who's a program lead for the Men of Masculinity organization. And this gentleman and Lee have been friends for a long time, but the spotlight is on Robert tonight. Robert Leung is going to be here sharing with us tonight. And I had the opportunity and the blessing to chat with him a few weeks ago, and he fascinated the heck out of me. So I said, we gotta get him back. So Robert, first of all, thanks so much for taking time out of your positive, productive schedule. How are we doing?
We're doing great tonight, Dr. Vibe. I'm really excited to be here with you. We did have a great conversation last week, and I've been looking forward to this with great anticipation.
Same here. And before we go any further, I want to thank everyone that's in the room already. Tony, Deb, Phil, Francis, Frank, Neil, Brad, Cliff, and Andrew, and special shout out to Cliff for helping us make this happen tonight. A few minutes ago, we were in the woods, and as Cliff told us to do, Robert to do a reboot, and as Robert added, sometimes men just need a good reboot, and they're on the right path. So we're going to spend a little time, get to know a little bit more about Robert, and then we're going to get to the main crux of our conversation tonight, Robert. So can you give a little background about yourself to our audience?
Yeah, let's see. My quote unquote original background was as a creative director in advertising for 25 years, and I've been part of the men's work for over 30 years now. That's how Lee and I know each other. We've been involved with that for quite some time, and I. As an outgrowth of that, it's funny because when I was thinking about telling this story, as an outgrowth of that, I became really interested from my own perspective and my own journey in where emotion fit in with men in our society, contemporary society, and where it might go. Because in a lot of ways, it became clear to me personally in my own, as I said, journey, the growth to understand my emotions and how to express them was a big part of my growth as a man. And I realized also that it was a complicated journey, given how our society looks at men and how they express their emotions, their ability or inability to express their emotions. So that began to inform my own personal growth, and as a result of that, I became a life coach. I've been a life coach for going on 10 years now, and that further informed my growth as I began to work with men and women, but particularly with men, to realize the challenges that they face trying to navigate their emotional state. And their interactions with women emotionally.
Okay.
So yeah.
What was the turn from the world of advertising to get into men's work? How did that happen?
Well, I don't think it was a turn, although in a sense I could say that advertising is about influencing people, and I became interested in understanding myself as a man. And I think the outgrowth of understanding myself as a man and wanting to influence people coincided with the idea of coaching and being fascinated why people do things. That's a big part of advertising too, is motivating people to do certain things, and why do they do them, and how do you motivate them? So I think those three things kind of came together, and coaching, I don't know if it was a natural outgrowth of that, but you could see where those three things could relate. Understanding people and how they work, motivating them, and bringing those ideas together.
Nice. When you start, give us some of reflection on your early days of coaching men. I see a smile on your face, and I always, how was the start?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, and it's a great question because I realize when you say that was the genesis of a lot of my coaching. It happened in the men's work, and I was made part of a men's team, and as a result of being on that men's team, I'd never really been in a leadership position before, and was cast in as the first captain of my team, and it just became this kind of raw processing of each other on our team, and I was the grand wizard of that, if you will, in really processing and digging into men, why they did things, what motivated them. And at the core of that, for me, came out of that it was all emotionally driven. And that was something that men were completely in conflict with because they didn't have an emotion at all, according to them. And I could relate to that because I was in the same boat to a large degree. So that's where its genesis started, this processing each other in the men's work. Why are you doing things? What motivates you? So it was a kind of intense, I'd call it therapy, but sometimes you didn't have a choice. So I don't know, it was kind of involuntary therapy sometimes. And, for men, it's a little bit like throwing a piece of raw meat into a cage and going at it. But as a result of that, there was a dynamic of understanding each other and trusting each other and being willing to be vulnerable with each other. That's the main piece that came out of that. And sometimes men went kicking and screaming into that process. And I understand why, because I've been there too. I've been in that circle. But the result was that men, when they were able to become vulnerable, they became stronger. And that was a new dynamic and an understanding for all of us. And that was the beginning of my coaching process, actually.
Nice. As you've gone through the journey, how have you witnessed or experienced any change in men and manhood over the last 10 years?
Yeah, I think there's been a dramatic change in masculinity and manhood over the last 10 years, certainly within the last 30 years, and I've been involved with that work for that amount of time. I think there's been given greater space for men to explore and experience their emotions and get to know the power of being vulnerable. So I think that it's been manifested in more cultural mainstreams, whether it's in movies and television and books and comic books and whatever media form you can choose. And I think that's also been informed by, women taking a stronger position and place in our society. Has also helped that dynamic unfold. I think men have had to become stronger in terms of being able to explore their own vulnerability because women have become stronger. So I think that while that hasn't always worked perfectly, that dynamic has been a part of it.
So I'm listening quite intently here. You said men have had to become stronger. Where do you feel the areas men have had to become stronger?
They've had to become stronger in being able to be vulnerable. And, vulnerability does require a greater strength. And I think that's something that it's difficult for men to understand because they only understand vulnerability from the sense of weakness. And so I think that's been a critical place that men can be, if they can come to that understanding, can be converted to that idea of vulnerability as power. I think of Brene Brown and her work around vulnerability. So I think it's a hard sell in a lot of cases, but if men experience the power of vulnerability, they're usually converted. They see how that can work for them.
Are you seeing more and more men open up and becoming more vulnerable? And what do you hear are some of the causes for them to be more vulnerable now than maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years ago?
I do see some of that. I see that certainly with the men that I work with as a coach, and the men that I've been a part of the men's work for many years. And I think the biggest reason is that there's greater permission to do that. I think there may be more role models available. I think seeing that sensitivity and vulnerability can actually be a manifestation of masculinity and power. Allow men to try and see how that works for them. So I think it's been about social permission for men to, in a sense, let their guard down and be who they are. You know?
Well, we're focusing our conversation topic tonight is why wait till you die to hear your eulogy?
Yeah.
And the first time you and I spoke, along with Lee Rosen, who'll be joining us momentarily, when you dropped this on me, I went, poof.
Yeah.
And people that I've shared this with have sort of looked at me going,
what?
Like, especially the men, they're going like, what are you talking about? Like, how did that come into place? What birthed that thought process?
Well, in a way, I think it's been a natural evolution for me. Even though on some level this seems unnatural, but I'll try to explain that. I think it's all about context. If I said to you, "How's your day today?" and you'd say, "Oh, it's okay. I got up, I went to work. I had breakfast. It was a day like any other." If I gave you the context of this is your last day, what are you going to do? I think you'd probably have a very different response. So the idea of writing a eulogy for the living, which is the title of the exercise that I've created, is about, with that context of this is your last day or someone you love's last day, what would you have to say to them? You could see there'd be a profound difference. And I say, what would you say to somebody you love? And what would you say to them on the last day that you were alive or they were alive? It's a world of difference between the two. And people are uncomfortable with the idea of eulogies because it involves and suggests obviously some kind of loss. But this is about eulogies for the living. So you get to tell them how you feel about them and how much you care about them while they're still here. Now that's uncomfortable on a whole other level. In fact, I posit that it's a sad truth that we are more afraid of the intimacy of telling people how we really feel about them than we are about death. So it's easier to tell people how we feel when they're actually not there anymore than
Absolutely.
It is to tell them to their face. And that's a bizarre irony. So I'm about getting past that. I'm about, let's give that eulogy to everybody that you love while they're still here. Let's make that a celebration. In fact, eulogy in the ancient Greece, eu means good and logia means speech or words. So it's good words, which in ancient Greece was praise. So it's about praising people, honoring them, validating them. And so who wouldn't want to experience that?
Nice. When you first launched this, what were the reaction of men?
Well, I launched this with men that I've known for, some of them for 30 years. So even they were like, well, this sounds like a crazy thing, but if you're suggesting it, we'll kind of go along with it. Other men who I've not known that long, I mean, they sort of trusted me. They said, well, if you say so, we'll give this a shot, And I've done this with actually now going on 3 different groups of men. And each week we'd select a man and the other man would write his eulogy and they deliver it to him. And I have to tell you, it's been one of the most profound experiences that I've ever had. I mean, in terms of, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. And I was the first one to go, and they read my eulogy. And I was so moved. I even get a little choked up talking about it now, but I can't begin to express the gratitude and how amazingly wonderful it was to feel the depth and breadth of that honor and validation. They brought up things that I had not been aware of that had, touched them and ways that we had connected that I wasn't aware of. And I thought, I don't want to be dead when that happens. I want to hear it now. And I think all the other men who've been privy to that and had the the reward of being eulogized feel exactly the same way.
That is really powerful. Tony Davis is saying it's harder to tell people how you feel about them when it's hard to deal with or hard to swallow for them. It is with someone that you love or tolerate.
Yeah. Well said.
Good point.
Well said.
Yeah, strongly said there, Tony. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up the room momentarily to have Lee Rosen come in, and we're going to do a practice of this in real time. So Lee, if you can jump in, that would be great. Wonderful. Lee did a change.
Yeah, I did a change just for you, Dr. Ive.
All right. Well, I guess the relationship, Lee and Robert, you've known each other for 10 years. Maybe you can just talk about your relationship, and then you can just move into showing what this is all about.
Well, Lee and I have known each other for quite a while, but why don't you go, Lee? Give you a chance to jump in now.
Sure. I'm going to say a little bit this, probably in the eulogy part, but I met you. I met you when I just got involved in men's work. So that was 12 years ago, and for me, it was a door that opened for me as my world got smaller and smaller. My stresses got larger and larger. My family issues. I had less and less time. And the only choice I had was to, focus and work harder, and, cutting out emotions, cutting out any type of area for myself to grow or be aware of what was going on internally. And, I found the men's work. And Robert, you were one of the, you were pretty popular at the time. And we bumped into each other there.
Right. And, yeah, we've done some work, some coaching work together, obviously, and that has, further enhanced that has really expanded the depth and breadth of our relationship and understanding each other. And, I deeply value the amount of trust and honesty and vulnerability that we've been able to share with each other. It's really enhanced my life, and I'm looking forward to hearing your eulogy. I think I'm gonna wait till we're off here to read mine, if that's okay with you. But because I wanted to actually go on to some other of the eulogy idea for our audience, if that's okay, Dr. Rod.
That's no problem. I'm just steering the ship. You're driving the ship, so I'm just making sure it stays on course. So whatever you want to do next, please feel free. And people, there's a lot of people on right now. If you have any questions, any comments, or if you'd like to actually come on screen, please just type it out in the chat on the side, and I'll let you in, and I'll certainly follow up with any comments and questions that you have. But go ahead, Robert.
Well, I'll let Lee go ahead with
okay.
the first, and then we'll go on.
Robert, so you want me to do my eulogy for you?
Yeah, I would love to hear that, Lee. Thanks.
Okay, great. Yeah. So yeah, before I start, like when you first said it, when you first mentioned it, so you mentioned it while you were when we're in one of our coaching sessions, you talked about it, and I was intrigued. And very interested in other people doing it. I thought it was a great idea for other people. When you mentioned, we should do it, that was a quick no, not interested. And then when Dr. Vibe, you and I got together, and it kind of came up again organically, and I said yes. And what I saw for myself was that I don't. Maybe it is, like you said earlier, maybe it is just afraid of intimacy. It's like opening that door is a door that, like, I don't know what's in it.
Right.
It's much easier to do it when you're not here. Like, it's contained, and I'm in full control. I can say what I want. But it was real difficult, and I procrastinated doing this all week.
Right.
So here's what I came up with, and I did get in. You know, it was hard to like really place you as Gan, but you know, so I met you in 2007, and like I said, it was, you know, while we were doing the men's work, and it was a offsite event, which was a men's gathering, and there was I bumped into you, and we had a short conversation, and you know, I could tell from your stature and your presence, it's like, you know, you carried yourself differently. You carried yourself differently from the men that were there. You carried yourself differently from the men in my corporate world. And I found out later, like, you know, you were Leung, and people would like react to that. You know, people would, you know, they wouldn't talk much, but they'd make some sort of sound, like. Not only at that event, but afterwards, you were known in the circles as, you know, pretty passionate and passionate man. But they'd make a noise that would say everything, and you know, in that everything, it was like high standards. He's very, very ruthless in getting to the truth. And so I only known you as a distance from a figure that's been in the work for 30 years, and I had just been starting out, but you were popular, and your team was popular too that you're on. You had a bunch of high-performing individuals on it. You know, other men, I'd hear them say something relentless about getting to a man's pain. You know, he's a legend. Ruthless, tells it like it is, a passionate man, you know, hard on the outside, soft on the inside. He can pierce your soul. And, you know, again, I still just knew you from afar at the time. And, you know, what I knew about you is your commitment to your family, and commitment in a way that, you know, with your brother Robert and his struggles. And your commitment in a way was not only in the form of help, but in the form of, you know, fatherly support. Like, he had to do some work here, and your support was extraordinarily compassionate, but drawing him in to better himself. And again, you know, we've never had a conversation, and that was just in the circle, known about how you treated your brother. And the first time I really got to know you was when you gave an event at another men's circle. It might have been in 2012 or 13 or so. And there was 200 men there, and you had a view that what you're talking about earlier, your view about men and exploring emotions. And the view in the circle was, you know, emotions are something that you ignore and push behind you and carry on. And your presentation was met with disgruntledness, anger in some areas. You know, you're
outright rebellion at some point.
How did it look from your perspective?
Some outright rebellion at some point.
There's a lot of grumbling, and I was very intrigued by it. I was intrigued by it because I did a really good job of just putting my emotions down and stuffing them and moving forward. And there was a beginning to understand the cost to that, to me personally. The idea of not needing help, the idea of doing it alone, the idea of toughing it up and moving forward was something that was natural and easy for me. And then the cost was showing up in other ways, in other areas of my life. So I saw you there, and you know, what I got from that was I liked your presentation with, you know, a minority of men. I admired you, the way you handled the disagreement, your ability to, and this is about who you are in total, your ability to challenge the status quo and also to stand alone. And your need to express yourself regardless of what other thoughts anybody else had in the face of disagreement. And that that was not the man I was. You know, that was a difficult spot to be in. So I saw leadership there. And at the time, you just started your coaching practice, and you handed out pieces of paper, and I took one, and I never take paper. Never, ever take paper from anyone. And I took it away. And if I do take paper, it goes in a recycling bin immediately. So I did. I took your paper and I put it in my pocket and I stuffed it away someplace. And it wasn't until, and the truth was, you intimidated me. I was scared to go into a coaching arrangement with you. But I took the paper and I tucked it away. And it wasn't, and then I saw you at other events, the men's group, the Talmud Church events and things like that. And I got to know a different side of you, and respect you in a way that was much deeper and closer. And I was searching for something different than the men's circle was going to give me, that kind of ruthless inspection that kind of came directly at you. Was not a place I didn't feel like I could be vulnerable in that spot. For me and my history, I needed something a little different. That was a place that was closed up for me. And I had just completed some work, my higher purpose work, and it was a time where my kids were grown up and didn't need me anymore. My purpose work was off the shelf, and I was looking to explore. And I found a piece of paper tucked away someplace behind a dresser, and I don't even know why I was looking behind there. I opened it up, and for me, I do believe in a little bit of that. Like, it was the right time, and I called you up, and here's the part, Robert, that you were just gigantic in having me explore different parts to my life, the doors that I kept shut because there were no reason or purpose to open. And I got to explore, and from that exploration, and from you creating a place that was okay for me to look into, I've had the most serious growth in the last 4 years than I've ever had in my life.
Thank you.
Wow. Yeah, and for me, it was like who you were in creating that space. I'm not a man who trusts and lets people in. I'll gladly help anybody else out and create that space for them, but I won't let anybody create that space for me. And it was the questions you asked, it was the insights you had, it was the willingness to stand and ask uncomfortable questions in a way, and coming from a place of true caring. And I got to say, there are things that came out of my mouth that were like tucked away resentments and anger, and doors opened that I couldn't believe I was saying. Like, who's that man talking? I'm a nice guy. I'm not a resentful, angry man. And stuff that was coming out of my mouth was that. And I got a chance to look at those things. So, you created, like I said, you created a space for me that that I could feel totally accepted for who I was. And there's only there's only 3 men in my life that I would consider mentors to me. And they all were able to create that space. It was, my dad, of course, and Mitch, who died this year or last year, and you, Robert. You created a place for me that that I was cared for and accepted, and I could feel you wanting more for me than I wanted for myself at times. And it was just a place of love. And one thing I just want to tell you is that you're a great man, and that I love you. I think we've walked side by side for the last few years. Thank you.
Wow.
That's beautiful.
Well, I think you're a great man too, and I love you. You're a compassionate leader, and it's an instinctive part of who you are, and I think that's always been true, and it's been my pleasure and my honor to work with you, and to share that journey with you. That was I think you see, Dr. Vibe, what this can do. I mean, I think you see the power of being able to deliver this to each other, man to man, or man to woman, or however, woman to woman. It's transformational.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm just gonna read some comments here from people. Steven says, I remember living eulogy ceremonies as a kid. It was like a roast, but only positive things, always tears.
Yes. Well said.
And Tony Davis Tony's asking, when Lee was talking, was it a rebellious anger or a righteous anger?
I would say it was more righteous, and it was righteous from myself, like not being fully self-expressed and compromising on a situation and resenting that I compromised, that didn't say it. So it was more like internally righteous that I knew the right way. But the truth was, I just didn't say what needed to be said.
Okay. Good. Cliff is saying safe space is needed for men to be vulnerable and not judge. That will make for a more gentle energy on this planet.
I totally agree with that. Totally.
Wonderful. You know what, Robert, do you want to continue on what you want to do, or do you, I think maybe one or two people want to come in. So what do you want to do next?
Absolutely. Let people come in.
Yeah, so folks, I'm going to open up the room. Like Cliff, I'd love you to jump on, because what you just said was very powerful and it had energy in itself. And Cliff has that. Here we go. Good stuff.
Gentlemen. Wow. Yeah, I've had chills listening to you guys talk about each other and the impact that men can have upon each other. It's few and far between outside of the men's groups that where people do come together, that men are feeling safe. They're feeling it's okay to be soft and okay to be open and vulnerable. That's the big word that I'm getting here in this conversation, is that the breakdown that we need on this planet, in my mind, from the masculine, is to become a little less masculine, to maintain that, celebrate the masculinity, but to also celebrate the opposite. And that comes with vulnerability, and a great point earlier on about women becoming more stronger in societies around the world, across the planet. It gives us, some pause as far as where we come from, hunter gatherers, all of that stuff. And I think it's wonderful. I think it's fantastic that we are now moving into this position where we can relax some of that, move more into, I don't want to call feminine side, and be more vulnerable, and cry and let our emotions out, because we see what has happened, especially in the last 40, 50 years, and especially the last 10 years, what happens when men, in a lot of cases, most cases, hold this stuff in. And they aren't feeling safe, and they aren't feeling, aren't allowed to feel vulnerable and express that. We see what we're seeing today in a lot of cases, in the recent past, where men will just get harder and harder, and then put up more barriers, create more division, more spotlights on other people as opposed to themselves, and we lose touch with our hearts. And that's where we are right now. We're in a lot of chaos, and we need this more than ever to have men and women, but men, and start the conversation today, to feel safe and have a safe space and be felt like they're met where they are without judgment. That's it. If I want to put it in a nutshell, that would be kind of where I see the power in what we have to do to support each other. And women too. I mean, women can be here to support men through this, but it's an amazing time that we have this so much going on around us, and so much coming at us so fast with technology, and everybody's trying to point fingers and break people apart, and do we get stronger? Do we step into that and become part of that wall, those walls that people are putting up, and say, well, I've got to build a taller fence than my neighbor, because I don't, as opposed to breaking those walls down, bringing the fences down, which is my whole blessing and gift, that I stir people up and say, tear down the wall, let go, and see what happens. It's amazing. So I applaud, Men and Masculinity. Great shirts. Where can I get one? I'm working on a Saab shirt from 1990 here. Can't compete with you guys. And look at Lee's shoulders. Look at he can handle a lot. That guy, Robert, you did some good work there.
Lee has always had big shoulders, and he can.
Man, he's got it going on. So I want to just add to the dialogue, whatever. Robert, great stuff, and
Robert,
of course.
Thank you, Cliff.
So Robert, what would you like to add on, or what is your commentary back from what Cliff just shared with us?
I'm happy that the Cliff got a lot out of this. I mean, I think this dialogue about men and emotion and being able to express their emotions, and it is an ongoing dialogue that needs to continue, because I happen to think that the millennial generation, while I think they can be more expressive of their emotions, I'm not sure that it's exactly happening in a way that supports the continued growth of masculinity. I think, on some level it can be sometimes, petulant. But so I think that dialogue has to continue, and the men for my generation and the generation after need to support that work and continue the process of understanding and being able to express their emotions from a masculine perspective. I think that's another side that's important to it too. I think that men, in the expression of their emotions, do it in a particularly masculine way, that they own and need to be able to explore it. I think, as Cliff said, in a safe and supportive environment, while it may not always be a comfortable environment. And so I think there's a distinction there as well. I don't think the process, certainly as I experienced and participated in, and Lee will attest to this too, that it wasn't always comfortable, and it wasn't always by choice sometimes. So, we were literally kicking and screaming into the process sometimes, but sometimes that's what it takes. And if you trust the process, then, you're willing to go with it. So I think that is the foundation of the work I did that Lee and I did together, and that the work we did within the men's organizations that we've been part of. The work that we did was not part of all the teams in the organization. In fact, there was a pretty small percentage of those teams, but it did have an effect on other teams when they saw the results of what it opened up and allowed men to discover, manifest, and be empowered by. So I think it's an important conversation that needs to continue. And in some ways, I think maybe the conversation has slacked off a little bit. I think it was pretty vibrant through the 80s and 90s, and I'm not sure if it's taken a turn somewhere else in the 2000s. But I think it's still a vibrant conversation. But I'd like it to continue along the guidelines that we've been discussing, and that primarily is exploring emotion.
Robert, I have a question for you. When in a man's relationship with another man, should they do this? Is there any set period of time?
Yeah, if you're talking about having this kind of conversation, or
yes,
yeah, I think that any time is a good time. As soon as the sooner the better. There's no reason to hesitate. If it's going to be an awkward conversation, it's going to be an awkward conversation now or later. So you might as well get into it, as soon as possible. Go ahead, Robert. I was just going to say, I think, as Lee said, in some cases you can manifest the result of that without saying anything. in the way that you interact with another man, that by your own presence, or you can just open the dialogue and say, what's going on for you, man? I see something in you. I see, and say what we see. Men are, our instincts are good. I don't know about men's intuition per se, but our instincts are good. And the thing that I say to men all the time is that, emotions are instincts. They're survival instincts. That's why we have them. Fear and anger are the two ones that we talk about most, but those are instincts. They're emotions, but they're instincts. They helped us survive for, millennia. So how can they be weaknesses? And that's what I say to men, and so they're all there for a reason. Grief and pain, sorrow, all of those things are part of human expression, and they're there to make us stronger, to help us survive.
Right.
And
So I was going to jump in with, I've done some work in the true purpose area and parts work. And a lot of this, I see a lot of strengths that we look at those and say, those are our protectors. Those are those things that are out there, parts of us that are there saying, you shouldn't step in front of that truck, or, and there's part intuition, but a lot of it is, survival and flight and all that stuff that we have to survive. I do want to jump back to the millennial conversation and technology. I think we have an opportunity here, and you guys, if you pick up on my stuff in the future, I'm going to be talking more about this as we go forward, about technology and how to turn it around and actually have it be part of this conversation and use it as a tool to connect people together in this kind of way, conversational, conscious conversation, I call it, which is what we're having here. This is an aware, being awake, being responsible and accountable to each other in the humanity sense, much less the masculine or men's sense here. And then the piece where, the younger generation right now is coming up a whole different set of ladders than we did. Right. And we had a whole set of different things going on in the 60s and 70s for us. I don't know how old Lee is, but that's where, I think, Robert, you and I came through. Right. And we saw a lot of personal stuff that the latchkey kids and, the 80s and the Gen Xers and now the millennials and beyond, they don't have that. They don't have a lot of the stuff that we had to go through in terms of conversation and having to be on those ladder rungs for longer, each one to get through what we had to not only survive but thrive and make a living and so forth. And so and it's no fault. There's no judgment here at all. This is just a reality of technology and socialism, the way the social structures have been escalated in an exponential way. So I just want to leave that kind of there and something to keep in mind as we look down, not downward, but upward to the new generation. They've got to carry the torches. We're not going to be around. We're going to have real eulogies going on sooner or later, and we'll be probably most of them will be after ours, and so we want to celebrate what we have to leave behind and so forth. I want to say one more thing about eulogies. I'm always the guy that ends up doing the eulogies. At, whether it's a dog's funeral or, family or something. So I think because I want to celebrate their life. It's not like about, Cliff was a great guy and right. And so I want to say, what can we take from this person no longer being here? The grief, the, left behind, loss. Well, that's all we're going to go through that. But what's her legacy? Right. What did they bring? What lesson did we learn from them? 10 minutes that we knew them, 10 years, 50 years. And usually I'll look for those bright spots and bring them out and have people laughing and so forth. And just celebrating their life and what we learn. And more I see across the board as I end up in front of the room for these real eulogies is doing what you guys are talking about while we're here celebrating what that person brings to us or brought to us in past tense and say, what did I learn from this jamoke that I knew, this joker? I learned to be light. to be in the moment, to be present, to celebrate that moment. That's what I learned. And it's amazing that a lot of the people that I do eulogies for, they're about that. They go too soon, some of them.
A great point.
Go ahead.
And but that's why I think, eulogies for the living are a powerful tool, because I think that they can serve the living in some ways more than they're serving the dead. I think it's important to honor people and to validate them. No question about that. But I know by personal experience, what the power of what Lee just read to me has done for my connection to him and our relationship. What having written eulogies for other men in this eulogy for the living process has done, to enhance who they are, and it's, I think, to me, it's part of a reinforcement of your character that you should not wait until you're dead to hear. I mean, this is the time that we need it now. We need that support. We need that sustenance, that emotional sustenance that continues to carry us forward and allow us to grow into who we are. And hearing it, the endorsement of other men is powerful tool. And there is no mechanism for that happening. So you should not, until you're dead, to hear that. I charge each man on the call, on this program, and anyone listening, to go out and deliver your truth to the people who matter in your life now. And you know what? Then you've got it written for when they're gone, and you don't have to rewrite it. If anything, it's more efficient process. But go out and do it.
That upgrades because of that.
Right.
They become aware or awake to something like, oh, I didn't know I had that effect upon you.
Yeah.
And that's something that then they say, well, maybe that's my thing. Maybe that's my purpose here, is to have people like Lee or Robert or the next person listening to be lifted up or something, a positive, obviously. That's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, I want people to imagine how hearing the truth, the true words, the true speech, as was said in ancient Greek, would change you and your relationships with everyone in your life. And is your discomfort a reason not to do that? That's the challenge I put forth with this, this eulogy for the living. Is it worth a little bit of your discomfort to deliver those truths that will change you and the relationships in your life?
Wow, that's powerful. Just to interrupt here, just to catch up on some comments here. This is Andres Robert.
Yes.
Yes, he said, how did you feel inside by listening to this eulogy?
I got choked up. As I often have when that comes up, to hear Lee's truth. And part of it is the standing up in public to deliver that, to be willing to make himself vulnerable and deliver that, because I know, having done it, that it's not an easy thing to do. And I heard some things from him that I had not heard before. It's very emotional for me, but I'm so grateful to have had that. I'm so honored to have Lee taken his time and his emotion to deliver that to me, that it just further bonds us in a relationship that is already quite close.
Nice.
Hey, Doc, I got one more comment, and then I'll step down and let somebody else chime in if they want. It strikes me also, we have so many struggles in life, and there's different ways that we can deal with it. If somebody delivers this to you, what a gift, because, and in so many ways, and if we're struggling later on, if we can draw upon that gift and say, I had that impact on Lee, he's a good friend, or I saw him one time, or, somehow you got this information to say, I'm worthy of living. So I'm thinking about depressed, people who are depressed, we all have these things, and men fall into that for not feeling they're productive. And, we could go through the whole list of stuff that men need to feel worthy of being here and so forth. I mean, you look at all of the stories of the ones we just in the last year, people we've lost from the Anthony to Robin Williams a year before that, or 2 years. You just look at the struggle they have, and if they had that in a couple of areas, they may still be with us. And I'm not talking about just the celebrities, but everybody.
A great point, Cliff. You make a great point. One of the things I talked about, this eulogy and a couple of other exercises, but particularly, I mean, it becomes part of your shield. It's something you wear proudly. And exactly what Cliff was saying, in those moments when you're down or things aren't working out or you hit a rough patch, to take those out and read them again is a shield to fortify you, to get you through those, to remind you of your value, to remind you of who you are, what you've done, what you've contributed, in a way that that a pat on the back or just somebody saying, "Oh, you'll get through this," is not going to cut it. It's something that is genuine, and it changes you. It really changes you. It allows you to believe in yourself, and we need those things. We need one of the things on the eulogies that I've been part of on my team is one of the men recorded them, and he sent the recordings of all the men to each man as their eulogies were delivered. So they actually have the words on a recording that they can listen to. And I've listened to some of mine on more than one occasion when I needed that sense of like, okay, you can do this, you can get through this, you can accomplish this, whatever. It's a cheering section that is always available to you. So it's our battle armor when we have to go out into battle.
Nice.
And last, I got one more point. I've lost a couple of good friends in the last year or two, and those things that you wanted to say to them, last fall, he called me on Halloween and said, Cliff, I think I'm dying. Like, dude, he was always he was the joker, right? He's always fooling around, and he says, no, I'm serious. I got a mesothelioma or something. I said, what? I know he doesn't wear a mask when he works on, sanding walls. So I wasn't doubting him in that way. I said, well, get it checked out or something like that. I mean, 11 days he was gone. It saddened me to say, boy, if he didn't have a will to live at that point. Okay. And so he just let go. The ultimate letting go of this body, this meat suit he was carrying around, and he was done with it. It was done with him. He just checked out, and it saddened me because he was one of the funniest, live in a moment guys. Always had a quick response and so on and so forth. But things you'd want to say to them after the gun, say shit, whether it's your dad or a friend or this one or that one. And if I just had to say, that some of the things in the eulogy would contain to him before he was gone. Would have been like, dude, do you understand how much joy you bring to the people you touch, and just in a moment's notice, just through your funny, and also. So I'm going to back down. Thank you, gentlemen. Great conversation. I hope I brought things to it that others will be able to take from and put themselves out there. Move through your fear of standing up in the moment. Be strong for others, and that will feed you
for the living.
There you go.
That's it. Thank you, Cliff. That was great. Well said.
Thanks, Cliff. Much thanks. Thanks for helping me make up a conversation.
I wanted to add one thing, and it builds a little bit on what Cliff was saying, that, I think that a great part of the grief we feel when someone is gone is largely that we didn't say the things we needed to say to them when they were alive. I think a major part of grief is regret for not having said what we needed to say. And I was fortunate enough because of my family and their round table. We used to tell each other, we used to get together on Thanksgiving, and we did for 27 years. And each person would tell each other person at the table how they felt about them every year. So we didn't leave, nothing was unsaid by the time, my parents passed and my brother passed, and nothing was left unsaid at that point. And I think that's a way to not have that sense of, not that you won't have some grief, but not because I didn't say what I needed to say.
Nice. I'm going to continue. Andres has some more things to say along the lines of what Tony Davis said. It's easy to give eulogies to someone you love, but others you love may have major issues with, and wouldn't want to be the one to eulogize them. Then Tony says back, "That is well said, Francis. I know my situation. There are two people in particular that are in my life that I do love, but I have major issues with. I wouldn't want to be the one to eulogize them because it wouldn't come out with the right mindset." And then Phil says, "Francis, aren't the eulogies for the people you love, but you have major issues with? The most important thing living eulogies to give isn't finding a way to do that worthwhile."
Well, I agree with what Phil said. I understand what Tony was saying too, and Francis, or what Andreas may be writing in under the same name, but I think writing the eulogy is as much for you as it is for the other person, and you don't have to share it. But I think writing it is going to put you in touch with what you really feel, and that's the major portion of this. I think it will be an opportunity to grow your relationship if you share it with that person, and that's a choice you can make. But writing it is going to make you aware of some things that you were not aware of before, because that context is so powerful that this person is no longer with you. So I think it's an opportunity to resolve issues even if you don't deliver it, and that it will give you the opportunity to reflect on that and decide whether you have the strength and choose to do that, because it can change your relationship for the better.
I agree. Lee, you've been listening attentively for the last little while, enjoying the conversation. Anything you're wanting to add?
Only that I'd say that there was a lot of fear around it, and there was a lot of fear up until I started talking. And then it was quite natural, and I felt like I was talking to you, Robert. Like it didn't matter what I had written, and I was able to go off that and just be natural. There was I just felt very connected to you, and I didn't mind it being recorded. I didn't mind anything, but what's interesting is the anxiety before it, my body not wanting to even look there to do the exercise, and then once I doing it was enjoyable. Like, I liked saying the things that I felt about you. It was,
thank you.
It was great, but the last week and a half wasn't. Yeah.
One of the things about Lee that I admire too is his willingness to work through things and to take on the uncomfortable challenge and go through it. That's been a hallmark of our relationships in coaching, but it's been a hallmark of Lee in the men's work. It's been a hallmark in his life to take on those challenges, and I think that's why Lee is an extraordinary leader, both at work, within the men's group, and the men's summit. I mean, I want to honor you for the work that you've done, and the inspiration and the example that you've set for me in that regard as well. It's, I'm on this webcast with Dr. Vibe because of you and your example. I was really nervous about being on here too, and nervous about speaking. In fact, when we were just rolling up the last seconds to going on, I had this document that I had written with all my cheat sheets on it, and it wasn't coming up. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to do this all from memory, and I'm just shaking here, Fortunately, it did come up a few seconds after we went on, and I didn't even have to access it very much. But
Wonderful.
We all have some anxiety.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. Well, I think we're going to start winding it down. I think I know it was an epic conversation, and it was just fantastic. And Robert, any things that you'd like to close out with? Any final thoughts?
I just like to reiterate, I guess, what we've been talking about, that you know, we all have an expiration date, and we all have things we need to say to each other. And you know, carpe diem, you know, hey, seize the moment. Don't wait. Particularly, you know, family, you know, I think is obviously critical, but friends and other loved ones that fall into those categories of relatives, you know, don't wait to say the things that matter, because, you know, there are no guarantees, and you will change. I guarantee you will change your life in some way, and you may change somebody else's life, and there's a pretty good chance of that. You may never know. You might not know about it till later. You may never know about it, but you will change. And for that reason alone, you'll make the world a better place for yourself and possibly for other people. So don't wait. Write your eulogies now for everybody that matters in your life. And if you don't choose to share it, you'll change. And I think it's likely that you will. And if you do, let me know. Please let me know.
Well, thanks again, Robert, for taking time to share with us. And I think that everyone that's been on here, even if it's for a few seconds, has a lot to think about in regards to this. And just reading some final comments here. Andre saying, I love the context of, quote, if this person were no longer with you, unquote. Once people are no longer here, we often stop thinking about the negative things and we think more about what we miss about them.
Right. That's true.
And Phil says, yes, let's do that now.
Good job, Phil. Go for it.
Absolutely. Robert, if people want to find out more or get in contact with you, how can they do that?
You can email me at HOM That's COACHING, HOM coaching. That stands for Heart of Man Coaching @gmail.com. I'd love to hear from everybody and anybody who's interested in, you know, finding out more about writing the living eulogy. Please contact me.
Fantastic. And I'm actually just putting that right now in the comments section for everyone, the email address. So there we go.
Thank you.
Lee, more than a pleasure. Lee, how can people reach out to you?
Oh, I'll put that right in there at lee@masculinity.com.
Excellent. And I will also put in the website for Men and Masculinity also. So it's there. I'd like to thank everyone who was on this epic conversation. You helped make it epic. Tony, Phil, Francis, Neil, Andrew, Bobby, Stephen, Andre, Herbie, Cliff for providing the technical support and great content along the journey. Big Brad, and of course Deb. Some other people who were on for a few months. I know Dre was on. There may have been some other people. If I missed you, it was because of my head, not my heart. One thing I've done.
I wanted to thank you too. Thank you for the opportunity to be on here and share this with you. It's been a pleasure.
Well, it's open anytime, and I'm going to have you back. So.
Yeah, I'd like to dig into this even a little bit more too. So
I would love to, and with Lee's blessing, we can certainly set that up, because I definitely want to dig into this deeper, because it's inspired me, and for me during this year, I've had a number of close people lose people in their lives, and my closest friend just lost his mother, and he had to basically go to the funeral in Jamaica.
Oh,
and I'm going. I know it's not the best time to ask him to do this with me, but I'm going to.
Okay, I'll be for that.
You know, and also I'm going to do it with my dad.
That's great, man. That's great.
And there's some wonderful women in my life that I want to do that for too. Like I just, because that's why I asked when you said, you know, when should I do this? And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, let's just do it, because you don't know.
Right. You don't. And it's about the gift of the living. You know, I mean, this revitalizes people, and I want to thank you too, Lee, for this great opportunity to share this conversation with you, and to thank you for that eulogy. And I will be delivering yours shortly.
No problem. And we'll just close off and say next up on the Metamasky M&M Explorers on April 22nd, we have James O'Rourke, who's going to be with us.
Great.
Yes, the title to be determined, but he'll be here on April 22nd at 8 p.m. So
I think that's Tom Mack next week, isn't it?
Is it? Oh, sorry, yeah, Tom. Tom is first. Yes, Tom is next Thursday, and then James O'Rourke.
Yeah.
So Tom Mack. So Tom Mack. Sorry, Mike. Thank you for watching my back. And also Lee. I guess we can start selling these shirts. Cliff wants one, but so Tom Mack will be on correction a week from tonight at 9 p.m. and he's going to be asking men, do you have a code?
Yeah, so the code is in the code, or personal code.
Yeah, right. Personal.
Yes, like a code of honor or a personal code. So, and Cliff goes, bam. So, something tells me Cliff's going to be back again next week. Thanks, Joseph, for just jumping in. And I'm just going to end it off. Thanks for everyone for watching, either live or on the replay. And I like how Cliff has just ended it off. Celebrate lives today.
Absolutely. Amen.
Nothing more than that. Good night, everybody, and see you next Thursday. Be well.
Be well.
Good night.
Good night.